Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, awesome. Good evening and welcome to the March 20th, 2025 Site Plan Review SPRC Subgroup Meeting for the Ballston 1 project. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia for the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for the Ballston 1 project are participating both here in person and virtually through electronic meeting. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the webpage, the project webpage, the county events calendar, and the email notifications sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. No watching the games with that on, please. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address it when it's appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes. For SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance and members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who were planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public period. Let's see here. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed and raise your hand in Teams. I will monitor the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. If subgroup members are participating via phone today without the video option, please announce your name and group you are representing now, and I will verbally check in to see if you wish to be recognized as you do not have the video feed option. For our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you will be called on to speak at the end of the meeting. Will be allotted 2 to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda items. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees or provide your name if in person and you will be added to the speakers list. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. So let's go around the table and introduce ourselves. My name is Nia Bagley, and I'm the chair of this project and vice chair of the Planning Commission.
I'm Matt Pfeiffer with the county's Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development.
David Howell, Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
Michael Bruce, Waycroft Woodland Civic Association.
Collier Cook, Ballston, Virginia Square Civic Association.
Jim Lantelme, Planning Commission.
John DeSource with Penzance.
Josh Vogel.
Matt Roberts with Hirschler.
Do we have any commissioners online or SPRC members online? It looks like we do. Okay. And they
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, Melissa Reggio, Park and Recreation Commission.
Excellent.
Meg Flores, Transportation Commission.
Fabulous.
Eric Goodman. I'm with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Okay. We have one more.
Yeah, I'm Kate Matos with Bluemont Civic Association, and I could not hear the question for who is supposed to introduce themselves, so I jumped in.
Righty. Okay, so, and everybody else is not on at the table, correct? Or are they? I'm still, you do have some staff here.
Yeah, we have some staff.
Yes.
I'm part of BKB.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. And so your name?
Willie Bermudez, I'm the design partner with BKB.
Okay, great.
Sergio Bricochea, Principal Planner for Development Services Bureau.
Walter Gonzalez with DPR, Department of Conservation.
I got a question for Matt. real quick. I asked to get a copy of the site or template, the site plan report that you use.
We don't have a template for our site plan reports. We generate our reports for each site plan.
And can we,
Okay.
we're not ready for comments yet. So Joan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Joe McIntyre, representing Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission.
Okay, before we start, as chair's prerogative, I know we live in very stressful times now. But I want to keep the conversation tonight, which is constructive. I want to keep it positive and civil and respectful of one another. I do not want to be forced to give an adult timeout here. So please just work with us. I'm into please and thank you. I think it's all wonderful that we keep up tonight. We have an opportunity, we have a proposal in front of us, we have an opportunity to shape it for the better, should it go all the way to the approval process. So with that, I appreciate your attendance here tonight and take it away, Matt, with the staff presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Nia. So I'm going to give the staff presentation. We'll skip through some of these slides as Nia's already covered a lot, but don't bear with me if I'm looking at my So we are talking about the Ballston 1 project. This comes to us from Penzance. We have faculty representatives here today. They will provide a presentation after I do. Go back. So this is a major site plan amendment located at 4609 Fairfax Drive. So the meeting agenda today, as I mentioned, we already did introductions. We're going to have presentations for myself and Penzance. And then the topics that we're going to talk about today are use mix and density, building height, form, and architecture, site design and layout, which includes the resource protection area, and streetscapes. And then we will have a variety of topics that we will cover at the next meeting, which I will get into at the end of this presentation. After that, we will have any members of the public who are joining us are free to speak, and then we'll just discuss next steps. So very briefly, the site overview. I think many of us know where the site is located. The site is currently zoned CO 2.5. It is identified on the general land use plan as medium office apartment hotel, or OAH. There are a number of guiding documents. The ones that I want to point out specifically are the Ballston sector plan, which is quite an old plan, which was approved by the board in 1980. So quite some time ago. There are also some more recent plans that have been adopted that we can apply to this site in terms of guidance. Again, some more information about the existing conditions around the site. So currently the site is developed with an office building. As you can see from this aerial view, the site is adjacent to a number of sort of landmarks. It's directly to the west of the Marymount University campus. It is across the street from the Ballston Holiday Inn site, which was the subject of another site plan that was approved, I think last year in 2024. Also bordering the site is the Bluemont Junction Trail, which goes north-south, and a spur of the Custis Trail, which connects to the larger Custis Trail that follows the Route 66, I-66, excuse me, trajectory. It is also adjacent to the Ballston Wetland Park, which is a public park. A couple of existing conditions I want to point out to you. Along the Fairfax Drive side, you can see this retaining wall here. It's about 18 inches in height. This is actually the top cap of the parking garage, which is existing for the site and which will be retained under Penzance's proposal. So background, as I mentioned, this is a site plan amendment. The original site plan for the office building was approved in 1981, and it was amended in 1984. So there's a 12-story office building existing on this site that is 2.5 FAR to density. And currently, Wakefield Street goes through the site north-south, and it is under a public street and utilities easement. So the developer is proposing, the first thing they're proposing is to dedicate the Wakefield Street in fee to the county. That will be it'll be a fee dedication, but to the west of the curb line along Wakefield Street, there will be a sliver of land which will need to be vacated and then rededicated as a public sidewalk easement. So the major site plan amendment would include demolition of the existing office building, but retention of the below-grade garage, as we mentioned. And the developer is proposing to construct a new 7-story residential building containing, oops, I think I left off the number of units, or they got cut off under the graphic. But essentially, they would be requesting about, they're above the base density in CO 2.5, which is 115 units per acre. So they're requesting about 66 units of additional density. In terms of height, they're proposing 7 stories or 83 feet. In terms of parking, again, they're retaining the existing below-grade garage, 335 parking spaces in total. They're proposing that there be 218 residential parking spaces and then 107 flexible use spaces, which I think some of which are compact. This puts them at a residential parking ratio of 0.66 spaces per unit, but keep in mind that does not include those 107 flexible spaces. They are proposing that to achieve the Green Building Incentive Program at the 0.25 FAR density tier. And zoning modifications that are requested are additional density exclusions, residential parking ratio, and compact parking percentage. So the first topic that is on the agenda is land use and density. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the online engagement comments that we heard. So there was a general agreement that residential is an appropriate use at this site. And the density is largely appropriate. That was the majority. There were some minority voices there, but that was the majority voice. There was some concern expressed about what was perceived as the lost opportunity for additional housing generation. I wanted to also mention that there's some overlapping policy guidance in terms of land use and density. The Ballston sector plan in particular, viewed this area as being appropriate for residential, hotel, or commercial uses. We have the Arlington County retail plan, which has no guidance for Fairfax Drive, but does designate Wakefield Street as a green street in which retail is optional and retail equivalents can be provided. So in terms of building height, design, and architecture, again, I'll start with what the online engagement comments were. I think a majority of the folks that responded to our online engagement felt that the building was too short given the existing zoning. Again, through CO 2.5, they could achieve 16 stories at this site. And they felt that the lower building heights were a lost opportunity and that they conflicted with goals, for streetscape, tree canopy, landscaping, things of that nature. There was some confusion. We heard about sort of the guidance that we presented during the about the gateway feature and what exactly does that mean? And then, there were some comments about wanting to see some further evolution in the facade design in a variety of respects. So I am going to provide some additional context about the building height. So the first thing I want to say is that there have been instances in the county where we have plan guidance for specific heights, where, if applicants come in well below that height, we've flagged that as an issue. We've not flagged this as an issue. We don't have a specific plan recommendation for a specific height here. And in fact, the GLUP does not identify this as a coordinated redevelopment district in which we would look for specific achievement of a vision that contributes to an overall target achievement of public infrastructure like affordable housing, open space, and things of that nature. So that's not what's going on here. Instead, we do have the Ballston sector plan, which the only real guidance on height beyond the underlying zoning is that there is a recommendation for a general taper away from the metro station towards sort of the edges of the area. The other thing I want to mention is that we do have the recently adopted 2024 policy and transformation, of commercial office buildings. And, while this policy is not specifically applicable, I think, to this scenario, there is a lot of thinking about, the variety of ways in which sort of our office stock can be reduced in order to meet that public policy goal of, stabilizing the office market. And so, there is some thinking again about, that is a public priority, and we have to keep that in mind in balancing other policy priorities when evaluating site plans. I also wanted to provide some additional context on the gateway to Ballston, which is mentioned in several places in the Ballston sector plan. Once again, goes back to 1980. So, there are a couple of places in the sector plan where the gateway is mentioned. I will say that while it appears in a couple of places, it has very, very little detail associated with what that actually means. In one place, it is mentioned in the context of the Fairfax Drive Boulevard concept, which has been largely implemented east of Glebe Road, west of Glebe Road, it hasn't been exactly implemented. There've been a couple of site plans, on both the north and south side of Fairfax Drive, west of Glebe, and it hasn't exactly implemented the vision. So, given all of that context, kind of what is staff's takeaway? What is our thinking on this? I think we look at there is an opportunity here to provide some kind of a contextual gateway. This is, many people are coming on I-66. This is their first look at Arlington, essentially. But, the gateway includes, in our vision, not just the building elements, but also the public realm elements. So the street itself, and then, the buildings on either side. So when we think about this concept, I think we should take a comprehensive examination of, really both sides of the street and how this development plays into that context, that urban environment. And so it has to be taken into context with, the approved development on the south side of Fairfax. So really we're looking, I think, for feedback from SPRC. How do the two buildings scale and design complement each other? Is there compatibility with the frontage treatments on both the north side and the south side of the street? Okay, with that context in mind, we do have some outstanding comments that we're continuing to work with Penzance on. And one of those related to the architecture are building overhangs. So as you can see from the graphic on the upper left-hand side, there are a few places where this proposed building would have overhangs above the base, meaning that, you can see from these images, the tower portion of the base projects beyond the tower portion of the building projects beyond the base. And so, generally speaking, we tend to not like overhangs for a variety of reasons. One is that, that they can potentially speaking, impact access to light and air at the ground plane. They can impact the ability of ground floor users to interact with the public realm in a more activating way. They can impact any inboard plantings that you have within a building setback. And they can also, in some cases, impact the ability for a full tree canopy to develop from street trees as the building's there. So for those reasons, county policy generally discourages building overhangs. I will say that in this case, there is no specific policy in the Ballston sector plan that discourages building overhangs. This is more of a general thing. I've clipped out a couple of images here from Roslyn and Crystal City, which show kind of, the general thinking in terms of building form. It doesn't include overhangs, but again, it's not directly applicable to this site. I will say that there have been instances in which we have supported overhangs, and that's when we've looked and say, are all of these other factors, have they been mitigated? If that's the case, then we can support overhangs. So again, this is one area where we would be looking for feedback from SPRC. Do we think that those impacts have been properly mitigated? So the next topic is the site design and layout. Just to orient you, again, we have Fairfax Drive, Wakefield Street, and then a private street to the north. To the west, we have the wetland park and the RPA. Loading access would not change from the existing configuration. Loading and parking access would not change from the existing conditions at the office building. Obviously, loading would be off the private street, and then to the west of the building is the ramp down to the parking garage, as you can see here. The applicant is proposing that the main lobby entrance be on the corner of Wakefield and Fairfax. Oops, sorry. So what we heard at the online engagement, most people felt that the location of the building services and the access was appropriate. There was a desire for more information from the applicant on stormwater management strategies, and then environmental opportunities given the proximity to the park. I will say that stormwater management and open space will be topics that we'll discuss at the next meeting. There was a recognition, I think, of the advantages and disadvantages of the retention of the below-grade garage. A lot of people felt it's good that they're doing this. This helps achieve some of the county manager's CMRI initiative guidance, but at the same time, it does have some impacts and trade-offs associated there. And then there was, on that note, we did hear from the online engagement, there was some general concern expressed about the large building footprint, what that does to, the potential for tree plantings, and, perceived impacts to the walking trails, street frontages, and things of that nature. So with that, I did want to provide some additional context on the RPA. This is not something that we see very often in site plans. And frankly, I'm not an expert on it. I had to spend a lot of time with our colleagues in DES figuring out what this meant and how it's applicable to the site plan. So I did want to give some legal framework. RPA is a term that is designated as part of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. It includes protected wetlands and other streams, things of that nature, with a 100-foot buffer. And it could be more than 100 feet if there's very steep topography in the area. RPAs are part of the Arlington County Code via Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. The code does allow for a grandfathering provision. So if you have a building that's already located in the RPA, as long as you are, if we determine that there is either an equivalent or less of a water quality impact, the building's allowed to stay. If there is additional footprint, or we determine there are impacts to the RPA, there would be an exception to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance that's required to be heard and approved. So from a policy perspective, in a redevelopment scenario, the goal is really to get a net improvement in the RPA condition and water quality protection function. Generally speaking, we would like to see structures move farther away from the RPA if possible. And we would also like to see impervious cover limited. And then a maintenance or enhancement to RPA trees and other vegetation. So in terms of our outstanding comments, so what we're seeing here, and you can see the red outline is the existing garage, which again is going to remain. There is no expansion really into the RPA because that existing structure is there and they're not expanding beyond the existing structure within the RPA anyway. What we are seeing is that the tower above the garage is expanding. And part of that, a small sliver right here is located in the RPA. So the question is, will there be an exception required from the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in this case? And the answer is we don't know right now. We're working with the applicant to prepare a water quality impact assessment. We have not seen that yet. And so we haven't made that determination yet. Now, if we do determine that an exception is required, it would require a hearing by a group called the CBORC, the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance Review Committee, which is a county review committee that reviews exceptions to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance, has the ability to approve them. So if we do determine that an exception is required here, they would be required to go to CBORC, or we would ask at least that they go to CBORC prior to coming to the county board. And so another thing, and the last point on this is that, part of our review will also be working with the applicant to determine the appropriate plantings that are within that riparian buffer. Okay, last topic are streetscapes. So in terms of the streetscapes, I will talk about some of the limitations there. But first, what did we hear from the online engagement comments? There was a general desire for greater width for both the shared use path that's proposed along Fairfax Drive and the planting strips on all frontages. There was a desire for greater soil volume for planted areas. And there was a desire for the concrete garage wall, which, is right here, remaining at grade, adjacent to the shared use path. I think there was people wanted more information about what that relationship was and what kind of limiting factors that provided. So we have, in terms of the streetscapes, again, the Ballston sector plan is very old and it really doesn't have any specific guidance for this site. So we are looking to other adopted plans and policies to provide that guidance. And there are several that I will mention. We have the master transportation plan. So on Fairfax Drive, the MTP recommends a 10 to 16 foot sidewalk, 6 foot tree and furniture zone. Wakefield Street, that's a 4 to 6 foot sidewalk and a 2 to 4 foot landscape strip. We also have the RB corridor streetscape standards from 2007, which recommend that Fairfax Drive have 13 foot 8-inch streetscape. Wakefield Street's not specified. And then we have the Arlington County Landscape Standards Reference Guide, which was done last year, which recommends that planting strips should be as wide as possible with a specific dimension of 6 feet. So I did want to talk, I've already talked a lot about the retention of the existing garage, but I'm going to talk some more about it because, again, I want to put it into some context about some of the recent policy that we have. So again, I'll go back to the policy on transformation of commercial office buildings. And some of the thinking in there is that in areas in which, part of a building is being retained, and in this case, a below grade garage, again, it is a public policy to remove existing obsolete office stock from the market. And so we have to take, any constraints that are inherent in facilitating that to happen. We really have to put that into perspective with other adopted plans and policies, and really, give it some heavy weight. That's not to say that it absolves Penzance from everything, but it is a factor that we have to keep into consideration. And, I think, the answer would not be to just say, get rid of the existing garage, because again, we have this policy which provides some thinking there. So our take on, this is that, retention of the existing garage is in line with the expected strategies that come out of this policy. And it does come with certain trade-offs. One of those is that there is this about 18 foot at grade wall, retaining wall at the back of the streetscape on Fairfax Drive, which does provide, present a constraint there. We are working with the applicant on determining whether streetscapes can accomplish policy objectives, because, again, we have to look at our policies and make sure that those are being adhered to the extent possible. While they are deviating from the landscape standards for a 6 foot planting strip, we do think that the Wakefield streetscape can likely meet objectives for the trail and street trees. So last slide, just looking at that in a little bit more detail. Wakefield Street, you can see here in red the extent of the existing garage. On Wakefield Street, I do want to make a distinction. The existing garage does not come up above grade, so we don't have that constraint, but it is directly below grade. So it really does truly limit the width of the planting strip that they're able to provide. They would not be able to, widen that planting strip without either taking away width from travel lanes and parking and bike lanes on Wakefield Street, or demolishing part of the garage. So, we're working with them on some solutions. One is, looking at, is it possible to, provide a little bit of extra soil volume to make up for the width of the planting strips there. We've also looked at, is it possible to demolish a small part of your garage to, get a more standard streetscape? So those are some options we present to the Penzance, and we'll let you guys respond to those. On the private street, again, one of our comments has been, right now this service road does not really have, it doesn't have any plantings. So is there an ability there to bump out the curb and provide for some more standard planting strips and street trees? Again, you can see the extent of the below grade garage, which again is directly under the grade of the sidewalk in the street. So it really limits our ability to do that. Again, one kind of thing that was raised by the applicant that we've discussed, is it possible? Could you do some planters with trees? I'm not sure what the utility of that would be. We need to review that a little bit more, but that does provide a constraint. And then lastly, one thing we're working with them on is, would it be possible to provide a spur here along this street that connects to the trail? So that is all I have here. I'll just say very briefly, we did do this online engagement in early February. We had 465 comments, which was really good. I think our communications team did some outreach to some civic associations who helped us get the word out about the online engagement. So we're appreciative of those civic associations in attendance for that. In terms of the process and next steps, we are here at the first meeting. At the second meeting, it's tentatively scheduled for April 28th. And the topics that we're targeting there are transportation and parking, landscaping and tree canopy, stormwater management, sustainable design, community benefits, and construction phasing. So that is it for me, and I will hand it over to the Penzance team to present.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. If you don't mind
Sure.
pulling up our presentation as
Yeah,
well.
can do. Bear with me for just a second.
So just again, Matt Roberts with Hirschler. We've got members from the development team at BKV, VICA, and Penzance with us here tonight. We're very excited to get this kicked off. Appreciate Matt's presentation, definitely stealing some of our thunder there, but also giving us a lot of other things that we can kind of focus on. Next two slides for me.
Sure.
There we go. So, as Matt said, we're talking about the Ballston 1 office building. This is an office building that was built in the 1980s, so it's starting to reach somewhat at the end of its useful life. And as with many other projects and buildings in Arlington, and frankly, the DC area more generally, we're starting to face an exodus of the tenants out of the building, with many of those remaining tenants to exit in the coming years. So in line with the county's CMRI policy, we see this as an opportunity to start pivoting and provide a better long-term use for the site. As Matt said, we are proposing a multifamily building here with 328 units and 7 storage stalls. Next slide, please, Matt. So, Matt's oriented you to the site pretty well. As he said, the site's located at a gateway point into Arlington. And, as I'm sure everyone's aware, this area is also changing with the recent projects approved, with better urban form, such as the Marymount building and Ballston Holiday Inn on the south side of the street there. So we're looking to add to that as well. Next. Matt's walked you through the existing conditions, but just to point out a couple things. Again, our perspective is the existing building that's there today is pretty much out of place with today's Ballston. You've got some monolithic and static architecture across the face of the building, as well as a lack of an urban form with the building set back way away from the street. And then Fairfax Drive in the images that you're seeing here just doesn't really function optimally as a shared use path. And as Matt pointed out, you can see in these images where part of that existing garage provides something of a constraint with future development, but also some opportunities that we'll talk about. Next slide. Same sort of conditions that you have on Wakefield Street as well. In this case, the pedestrians also have to deal with a large curb cut getting into the site. And then at the back of the site, really, the existing building kind of has a lack of connection to the trail that goes to the wetland park. And so we're looking at opportunities with this redevelopment to make some better connections there as well. Next slide. There we go. So, we had a lot of goals in mind when we came to the table with this idea. Just to highlight a couple of them, you can see the overall goals on the slide there. But really, trying to achieve the sector plan's guidance for creating a gateway presence through the architecture and the landscaping of the building. We also want to enhance those existing connections to the open space, as you'll see through the use of glass balconies and patio level units. We also want to create a building that's going to fit into the current and future urban context of Ballston. And then, as Matt pointed out, there's a lot of things that revolve around retaining that existing garage, but we ultimately see that as a benefit here, not only from the CMRI perspective, but also not replacing existing usable concrete with more concrete. Next slide. So this is going to be your first view of the building as you arrive from I-66. You can tell at this corner, the materials have a softer tone on this side, basically reflecting the adjacency to the wetland park. And the materials also transition as you go from the top of the building down to the base, where you're going to start seeing a greater use of glass. You can also see how we're enhancing the biophilic connection here through the use of those balconies, the glass at the base. And really that's trying to help establish some of those connections to the existing wetland park and the future Fairfax Drive landscaping improvements. At the peak of the building, you're also going to notice the pergola structure. And that really, from our perspective, is creating a unique architectural element that transitions down to that landscaping at the base, which also enhances the pedestrian feeling of the gateway here at Ballston. Next slide, please. We're now looking at the corner of Wakefield and Fairfax. The building does its first architectural and materials transition, and we start to create the main entrance to the building. Here, there's the repeated use of the balconies and glass to continue those biophilic connections, as well as creating eyes on the street. Next. We're now transitioning down Wakefield Street and the service drive. And this is where, again, you get another transition of the building from the architecture and materiality. And we're going to start creating the urban residential building that faces out to Wakefield Street and the service drive. Again, pointing out the continued use of glass and the balconies, which in the next slide, if we can go to that, you'll see that also at the ground level, we're going to be introducing patio units for a more direct connection out to the street. That's really, in addition to the balconies, adding direct eyes onto the street, activation at the street level, and something that the office building can't provide when people aren't in it and when it's empty. You can also get a sense in this image where the building comes directly to the public realm. Next slide, please, Matt. And that condition is going to continue all the way up Wakefield Street. Next slide. Lastly, we're coming back to the edge of the building at the wetland park. And again, those materials and architecture change once again, starting to create that softer tone and mirroring what's happening in the wetland park. What you'll see in a couple images, but you can get a sense of in this slide as well, there'll be ground floor patio units along this edge. And so that's creating eyes on the trail that aren't there today when there's after hours at the office building, as well as creating direct connections for our residents to the wetland. Next slide. So now we're zooming out and you can see the building in the full context of the block. And I want to pause here for a second to kind of talk about the height, because that really was a primary comment we saw in the online engagement. We did not come to 7 stories lightly. It wasn't something we just put on paper. We studied a lot of options before we ever even submitted a concept submission to staff for review. So we looked at things like retaining that existing office tower. And what we found was, that office tower in particular, unlike some of the others in Ballston, just is not laid out very well for floor plates that serve residential uses. We also looked at a variety of options for going above 7 stories. What happens when you go above 7 stories, though, is the construction type changes. And at that point, you're looking at concrete construction. That's not necessarily an impediment in and of itself, but what it does mean is that there is higher cost of construction. That means that's higher rents. And ultimately, what we don't see for the Ballston market in this area right now is those higher rents being sustainable. That means that the project is not financeable, and that means ultimately that it's not deliverable. So we'll get to that in a second. But the last thing when it comes to building height is also going to be retention of that garage. Again, we think retaining the garage is in line with CMRI. There's also a lot of reasons to do it from an environmental perspective. Don't trade out usable concrete for more concrete. But when you go taller with a taller structure, what's going to happen is you're going to need to also shore up that garage. There's additional construction requirements with that. And you get back to the higher rent issue. Now, the higher rent issue is a problem for the applicant, but where it merges with the county's issue is that if the project is not deliverable, we cannot deliver on the county's goals for housing. So the applicant and the county are aligned in wanting to bring forward something that can actually deliver on housing. You can see Penzance doing this in other places in Arlington. West Roslyn is a prime example. The existing Roslyn Gateway project that they're putting forward right now, concurrent with this project, is another example, way over 20 stories. So when you look at the comments that came out, it definitely is a question. Why wouldn't the developer go taller? And for the reasons that we've talked about, we would go taller if we thought it was deliverable, if we could help the county deliver on its housing goals as a result. But given all the factors that we've looked at, we just don't see that as a possible reality at this point in time. So next slide, please, Matt. Matt talked a lot about the gateway. And so, what we tried to do is also show how this building is going to look from the ground level, especially in line with the Ballston Holiday Inn building across the street. And so you can see how these buildings start to help shape the street and the gateway in the context of the new environment and the new development that's going to happen on the south side of Fairfax Drive in the coming years. Next slide, Matt. Looking, going east now on Fairfax Drive, you can also see how the architecture and landscaping of both buildings is going to help create that new urban form along the street. And particularly for our block, we're going to get a new sense of place for this site, something that I think is lacking there today. Next slide. Site layout is a huge issue for us as well. Especially given the context of the area, we want to ultimately create appropriate connections to the wetland park and our urban streets that are adjacent. We want to ensure viable pedestrian connections around the site. This is a very walkable site to Metro. And then we also need to contend with the existing garage and find opportunities with that to enhance the gateway. Next slide, please. So primary goal for the site layout was to try and create a new urban form. Wanted to really bring that building to the back of the sidewalk where it's not happening today. We also wanted to ensure that there's sufficient opportunity with the building layout for tree canopy, landscaping, and streetscapes, a lot of things that we'll talk about at SPRC 2. But the site obviously also has some challenges that Matt discussed and things that we need to contend with. We mentioned the garage at length, but we do see that as an opportunity to maintain that existing parking structure. And in a slide or two, what you're also going to see is that there's an opportunity there above that existing retaining wall where the garage is above grade to create additional landscaping and enhance that gateway experience for pedestrians along that route. The site also has RPA, as Matt mentioned. The existing garage is within that RPA. That line has kind of jogged over the years based on where the wetland park restoration and when that was occurring. But while we are expanding the building tower limits, that is all within the purview of the existing garage. We're not going outside the bounds of the garage. And so at this point, our perspective is we don't meet the criteria for an exception, but as Matt said, it is an ongoing conversation and something that I'm sure we will resolve. Next slide, please. So as I said, we did lay out the site to ensure a number of viable pedestrian and bike connections along all the frontages. What you're seeing here is the future Fairfax Drive streetscape. And what we're going to be doing here is creating a true shared use path where basically one right now doesn't have any protection from the street. And so we'll be installing trees where they ought to be to provide that protection from vehicles. And then ultimately creating a path that both pedestrians and bicyclists can use safely. And then, as I mentioned in the last slide, behind the garage and the retaining wall there, it's a great opportunity to do landscaping and enhance that gateway experience at the ground level. And that's an experience that's going to continue along that entire frontage. Next slide, please. Along the trail behind the building, there's also multiple enhancements. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be the ground floor units, those patio units, where there's going to be direct connection and activity on the street. And then we'll also be continuing some of those landscaping features to bolster that connection to the wetland park and the feeling that you have along the trail. Again, an ongoing discussion, something that I'm sure is going to evolve with the project as well, but there is multiple opportunities here. And last slide, please, Matt. And then just to bring it back to Wakefield Street, We'll see some similar changes, including removing that large curb cut, creating better sidewalk connections and the tree panels above and beyond what's there today. And then again, I really want to emphasize utilizing those patio units as an opportunity for continuous activity along Wakefield Street for the building. So with that, thank you very much for your time. We're looking forward to your discussion.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. So before we proceed to each of the topics for tonight's agenda, based on what we just heard, does anyone have any clarifying questions? Jim?
Yeah, I have a few, if you don't, if you
Yes.
indulge me. First off, it's actually more for DES. Is Fairfax Drive in front of this site county owned, or was that retained by VDOT when Fairfax flipped?
VDOT.
It is still VDOT there. Ugh.
It's both. Sorry. Yes. We confirmed there's a, right where the median splits in front of the hotel, VDOT's interest ends right about where that median is. The rest of it is county owned going to the east of that.
So how much in front of your property?
It's approximately, I don't know, 40% of our property is VDOT control.
Okay, good. And for Matt, the building that's there now, to what extent did that use up the density for its site? Was there more density that was not taken advantage of?
The building I think the building that's on the site right now is exactly at 2.5 FAR.
Okay, so it filled it totally right up to it. Okay. That's the information I just want to be able to have. Okay. That's it for, I think, right now. I might have more clarifying, but those two, the ones I was thinking are.
David?
Yeah, I just want to be a little more clear about the transformation of commercial property building facets of this, because that's a set of policies and it's also a process or multiple processes or choices, multiple choice of processes. In any case, to expedite, as you all know better than I do, there are ways to not have to go through all the steps that you would normally do in a project. So what I'm trying to figure out and is whether I mean, I understand the issue of the floor plates and not using the tower. I'm wondering if you explored using the tower, but adding to the open area around it with other multiple configured structures that wouldn't be necessarily so tall, so wouldn't necessarily have to have all the reinforcement, just use the existing structures that are there. And then, you know, the garage can probably hold a few floors. So something like that. Did you explore that option as opposed to just taking down the entire tower?
Yeah, we looked at pretty much everything under the sun, including retaining the existing tower, adding to the existing tower, doing a variety of heights, I believe somewhere between 8 and 12. Ben, we can bring those slides at SPRC too, if you like. Yes. We actually have the concepts for those. We looked at all those. I think at the end of the day, you know, once you get over that 7 stories, it's the change in construction type that leads to all the sorts of ramifications that I discussed. And again, building cost is absolutely the applicant's responsibility. But again, where these two things dovetail is we want to be able to deliver a project. The county wants people to deliver housing, and this is how we see doing that on this site.
And if you taper it down, you still have the tower, and the tower is not conducive to those floor plates. So you kind of have a dead tower until you get to the point where you've added on if you do shorter structure. So you kind of don't have anything to do with that remaining structure. Back to where we are here.
You're going to use Canadian lumber.
It's, you know, these things are all a consideration.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, I do think it's appropriate that Penzance is doing the very end of the corridor, since, you know, Penzance is at the very end of England. So.
Joan?
Yeah, I just kind of worry about the 7-story limit that you've put on, because the International Building Code allows for mass timber buildings of up to 18 stories.
Sure.
And there's actually a 22-story mass timber building in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So is there something about the structure of the underlying foundation that can handle the additional wood structure to go that high?
The overall cost of doing that wood frame structure with mass timber is very similar. And so Ben can speak to this more intelligently than I can, but there are very similar problems between the two.
Yeah, I agree that the code allows a building of that height out of mass timber. It's a very different construction methodology than wood frame. And so the cost structure is different. The other issue in this market, there's not a lot of mass timber here in this market. It's really concentrated on the West Coast. And there's availability of raw materials on the West Coast and a labor force that just isn't here yet. And so, you know, the construction team that's been advising can certainly give us more information on the cost challenges with mass timber at the next SPRC. And sorry, Josh, you're gonna.
I was gonna say, I'm also not aware of ISD even having gone through the process of adjudicating that type of building to even know how it can actually be built from an Arlington standard. And so I think that's probably a future thing that hopefully they're able to do, but I don't even know if Shariard is even able to go through the process of approving a permit set with a mass timber consideration. We can ask him to see if there's a constraint there too.
It's certainly on his radar, but I agree with you. It's not something that I'm aware has been done in the county.
So just to clarify, if you wanted to do it, you would have to basically bring all of the product across the country because it would be created somewhere close to where the trees are that's going to be used for this, right? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I don't know enough about it to say that with certainty. We do see mass timber. We don't see mass timber here in this area. And a lot of what I read is about the availability of the force for that construction type. But that is not an area of expertise of mine, so I certainly don't want to misrepresent.
Yeah, mass timber, they're not solid wood beams. They're cross laminated timber, like beams that are laminated together. And so, those materials would be imported from outside. But I think the most important thing that I think they're hammering home is there's no labor force here that builds that product. So all of the construction workers would have to be imported from out of market.
So that's,
And there is a distinction between mass timber.
Yeah, because wood frame, you're actually using solid 2x4s, 2x6s of soft lumber.
You're just doing straight stick.
Literally, yes.
Stick over.
So in this area, we don't have any fabricators that actually create those. So not that we're.
So John, did you have any follow-up or anything? No.
The trail on the west side of the building, it's hard to tell from the presentation here. But it looks as though a chunk of it is on your property.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
is that, okay.
Starts off of our property, kind of
Goes in and then
it comes back out.
Okay.
Correct.
Is that currently under an easement with the county? How does that operate?
Yeah.
Okay, and your plan is, but it goes over it looks also like it goes over the garage at least one part?
It does not cross over the garage. It's just, there's a pinch point where it's just between the property line and the garage, but it's not over the garage.
We're not proposing.
Okay, so it's not over the garage, but it is on your property.
That's correct.
Okay, would that easement continue?
Yes.
That'd be the same permanent easement that we have now. It's permanent easement should stay, exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're not giving that up. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's a clarifying question I wanted to know. Thank you.
Got a question on the North Fairfax. Right now, we have a bike lane and a walking path that are separate. And it looks like you are combining those. Our problem today is lots of e-bikes, e-scooters, they need a separate, distinct lane. A lot of those are used up and down that trail by commuters going to and from work. They are dangerous for pedestrians. We have a number of elderly residents that have to walk. It's dangerous to have the Because again, you can see them. We've got Capital One, Capital One bike, or whatever, the red Capital bikes, the bike shares, but others that aren't go back to it. So again, we Civic Association, we want to keep separate bike, separate walking lanes, especially.
Remember too, at our next SPRC, transportation will be heavily discussed there. So this is good to make a comment to them.
Yeah, I just saw they talked about it earlier.
Yes, thank you.
But
From a streetscape perspective, two things to highlight. I think one thing that Matt brought up, and then one thing that you just brought up, Michael, which is, the width of that area, it's a mathematical problem. We've got the garage on one end, we've got Fairfax Drive on the other. However wide the county wants us to make the path versus the tree panels, that's just the question. So however wide they want those two factors to be, it's X minus Y and you get Z, and that's what you got left. In terms of separation, this image is showing the possible separation of pedestrians from bicyclists. You can see it sort of at the corner there with the bike.
can you point it out? Because I don't.
Yeah, sure.
I don't see it.
Yeah. So right here, showing just the bike lane symbol, and then behind that, an area for pedestrian sidewalk.
Yeah, and just so our thing is you need two physically separate lanes.
Sure.
Like you have.
And ultimately,
The
it's
way it is to the east in front of the Marymount, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Cycle track.
Right, because we
It's
two
two separate
built
things there.
two very separate, distinct lanes
sure.
with a physical separation, which is
Exactly.
grass median strip, which provides the safety. I can tell you, I used to live in an area like that in California, and the number of accidents from bikes hitting pedestrians was very large.
Nia said it'll be next week, next one for the transportation. So pinning that, but for you to explore,
Yes.
would it be, given that here?
Okay.
About
transportation.
The pedestrian way above, so they are physically separated along this part here. Is that a possibility to do two physical levels, but they are physically separated?
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's one thing that.
It's not for discussion today, but just putting that in your,
Understood.
take a look at it.
Okay, so last clarifying comment, Eric, online, take it.
So I just wanted to ask, since you're talking about the path there, it looks like you're moving the trees now over to the curb area. Is that the case?
Correct.
Will the overall path be the same width, or is it actually get more constrained?
So the overall path is not going to change in any substantial manner because the trees right now are on the opposite side of that path. So there is an existing tree stand over there. At the end of the day, we're still constrained by that garage. And so the ultimate width of that path and that planting area is roughly the same as it would be today. There's no proposal to push the building out any further from where that retaining wall is. So from that perspective, that total area is not reduced in any manner.
Okay. What? Go ahead.
Our main goal here with the planting strip was to do something that doesn't exist now, which is to separate pedestrians from vehicular traffic, which is also probably a concern because you have two on-ramp lanes going onto I-66. And what we're trying to do is create a soft barrier to separate cars, bikes, e-bikes, humans from those vehicles that are traveling upwards of probably 40, 50 miles an hour at that point, while also creating that biophilic, tree planting scape, which is also another initiative that we're trying to hit. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, again, the Civic Association wants to.
So let's get Eric,
Just-
finish
just
that up.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask, we do have trees that are on the opposite side, but I noticed that the roots from the trees create lots of unevenness where that path is. When it rains, you get rather deep puddles. So one thing you want to probably keep in mind with all your plantings and everything there is that they're not going to have root issues that are going to cause undulations in that shared use path.
Yep, it's absolutely on our mind. And when you redo those panels to the county standards, that's one of the things that the county is going to be looking at is, do you have sufficient room for root growth and healthy roots, and so that they're not also interfering with adjacent facilities.
Thanks. And I'm sorry, what else?
So that they're not interfering with adjacent facilities.
Okay. And just going around the corner, are you constraining the sidewalks on the Wakefield side? I know they're pretty wide brick sidewalks currently.
No, there's no constraints on that. I mean, the plan is to have an 8-foot wide sidewalk, which is fairly standard for a street like Wakefield. And then in terms of the tree panels, those could get wider depending on, certain soil depth issues that we'd have to resolve with the existing garage underneath it. And that would necessarily impact the, sidewalk width. But, at the end of the day, I think that's just a discussion between us, SPRC, and staff about what exactly do folks want to see out there, and with the existing constraints, what's achievable.
All right. And is there an entrance right on? I didn't even see the entrance very clearly. Is that right on Wakefield Street?
No. Well, there's an existing curb cut on Wakefield today. That's getting removed, and all traffic will be diverted to the existing garage entrance at the rear of the building. Same thing with the loading. Loading will be off the service drive where it is today.
So there's no kind of central entrance anywhere for the building?
No.
Well, the residential entrance.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I misunderstood you. Yeah, okay, I apologize. I thought you were talking about the vehicular traffic. The main entry at the building will be right at the corner of Wakefield and Fairfax.
Okay.
And the door does sit on North Wakefield, and that's what the address will be, is the North Wakefield address.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and I think, Kate, do you have a question or clarifying question?
Yeah, my question is, with regard to the main entrance, wherever it is that the entrance where also food deliveries will be? I'm asking because in another apartment I was in last night, there were a lot of door dashes, lots of cars parked in front of the building, and I can't quite conceptualize where does all that kind of traffic end up?
Sure. So there's existing on-street parking today. There's the opportunity to retain that. We have received some comments from various staff and online engagement comments about perhaps putting in a bike lane there as well. So, if the parking remains, that would be the primary opportunity for the drop-off such as that. And if it transforms into a bike lane, we would look at an alternative space for folks to do the drop-off so that they're not interfering with traffic.
Any other comment, Kate, before we go on to the discussion for the topics tonight?
No, I'll just look at what they come up with next. I just know it's popular, okay? There's a lot of traffic that comes, and because of Fairfax Drive, we don't want any backup in that particular area.
So question on the streetscape. Do you intend to keep the brick sidewalks that are part of the Ballston plan today?
What do we propose with that? I will say no. The current county standard is concrete sidewalks, all brick is being removed. So what is called the clear sidewalk would be all concrete. Occasionally there is space between tree pits that can have a different treatment as long as it meets certain county standards. But the primary clear pedestrian sidewalk will be concrete.
Is that something that staff can look at keeping to keep the look and feel of the rest of Ballston?
I think I'll defer to Sergio, but I think, I would say the Ballston sector plan is certainly the oldest and superseded by various other policy documents such as the Russell Ballston streetscape standards and master transportation plan. Anyway, so
we have a lot of site plans that ask that look to keep the brick sidewalks. So that's something I know from the Civic Association. We like brick, prefer not more concrete.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we understand that we look at the brick and the history of it, but it also comes with the maintenance cost. on that as well.
And it
I know, I
becomes,
understand.
and I have to say, it becomes unsafe. Try it in heels, guys. Just saying. Just try it. No.
I'll take your word.
Yeah, thank you. Okay,
Well,
and we,
is there something other than straight concrete put there that's a little more consistent with the rest of the look and feel of the areas? I mean, that's real important in my.
well, they can look at that.
Yeah,
So,
let's-
I could speak to that if it's okay.
so go ahead.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Prio. I'm on the Disability Advisory Commission. And we were given the site plan in advance. And we have had great complaints about the use of walkers, wheelchairs, canes, that the brick paths become unstable. And so that is one of the reasons, a disability accessibility reason, and not just maintenance for not having the bricks. But I'll speak to any alternatives. We were told at our latest meeting that the Arlington has figured out a way of having a brick look that is sealed over, that's not actually bricks in the way they are usually provided.
Stamped concrete.
Yeah. That'd be good. Yeah, is something dyed to look like the bricks, not just plain old white concrete.
Okay, we'll add that to our list and we'll get more of a report later. So I'm gonna finish this up now for the clarifying questions and move into the topics. So the first topic that we're discussing tonight is use mix and density. So questions, comments?
Fine with me.
We've talked enough, a little bit about this tonight anyway, but I want to make sure, even online, does anybody have any questions about use mix and density?
I do have a question come from my, right now, we got people who are retired from that. It's the headquarters of the National Security Agency right now. The building is mostly occupied. There are also contractor jobs around there. You know where those jobs are going?
We have a GSA tenant, heard about them a lot in the news. They're being told to vacate. They've not renewed their lease. They are scheduled to go to the new St. Elizabeth campus, which is currently under construction. And so they vacate, the building will be substantially vacant.
So all I will tell you, county's gonna lose a lot of jobs. Yep. And it's not just the federal employees, but the contractors that are there. So is the county looking, to try and keep those jobs in Arlington? We've got a lot of, that gets back to use.
Yeah,
A lot of vacant space.
Those are good comments. Unfortunately, they're not within the purview of SPRC to try to resolve.
No, I know, but it's a policy thing for the county.
So let's go to,
No, I just sorry, but it's a policy thing for the county because we gotta look at the greater county good, not just one
and
applicant.
we'll make a note of that. And I'm not sure what we can accomplish in SPRC for that. All right, moving along to building height, form, and architecture.
I'll lead off on that. As I put in, when I did to Mike, I was one of the people that said, really, couldn't you, does this, actually, there's another almost clarifying question. Does the building actually use all of its apartment density in this form? Or could theoretically it have more? And I understand the construction issues you're talking about, but is density being left on the table here?
No, it is, they're about, let me go back to the slide in my presentation. They're above the base densities. The base density here, CO 2.5, is 115 units per acre. And so they are requesting 144.
Okay, good. So we're getting.
Yes.
Okay, that is, yes, that's good. The architecture strikes me, it's mixed. The corner of Wakefield and Fairfax is probably the most successful as far as I'm concerned. That sort of really pops. The other sides are sort of just leave me so what, it just doesn't look like it's particularly special, but I think that corner is probably the most successful. It really draws the eye. It's very sophisticated. So I like that. I also like very much the idea that you have those units on the ground level that are patios that look right out. It activates the ground plane. I like that. I think it's very good. I concur with the staff about the overhangs, concerns about that. The building looks as though if somebody bought clothes that were 2 sizes too small, you could fit into them, but you know it isn't exactly, it wasn't right. This building looks like it's just sort of pushing itself out all over. That's sort of the impression I get with it. So anyway, yeah, the one corner looks great, the other two, I don't have any.
Yeah,
And the gateway treatment, I have no idea what that even means. And it's so sort of, it doesn't do it for me, but that's very subjective.
I'm gonna raise my hand as supposed to be, say something here.
Yep.
So, having sat through all the meetings with the Holiday Inn project, most projects come in and you see an evolution, which is usually for the better on the architecture. We're not there yet. I don't feel we are yet. I wish we still had our architect on board with us now, because I'm not technically knowledgeable enough about architecture to tell you what's wrong. But you're going to have a really classy looking building across the street, and you might be competing for rents with them. So I feel you're not there in the design yet. It needs to be, evolved in some manner. You're right. It can't be blah. This is supposed to, you don't want it to be blah. You want the residents to feel they're coming someplace special. And right now I don't feel that. And also on the patio units where you are attempting to, and we're going to talk biophilia later, but you've said biophilia, there'll be some interest there. What if you have somebody who doesn't want to put anything out there? Is there, are there rules if you have the patio? Just something to consider, something to come back with when we talk about sustainability. It's nice if somebody has a plant out there or something, but for some other people, if they don't have anything out there, maybe there's an incentive to do it, or do they have dead stuff out there? They manage that themselves. So just a thought. And the overhangs, I'm not a big fan of the overhangs myself either. So now we're going to do, David, you got a comment?
Sure, I have a couple. Yeah, I think the facades are just a little too busy. It's not that every side has problems, but especially if you're looking at it from an angle where you're getting 2 sides in your view, it's just too much going on to me. I don't mind most of them. It's just too much altogether. A little bit more consistency, I think, would be better for the overall impression. I also think that you could make a case for those gateway features on all the corners. By the way, what are those? All those little? What are those, lawn chairs or something? What are all those little things on the roof?
Condensers for the HVAC system.
For each individual unit?
Mhm.
So that takes up the whole, you're going to put a solar cell on each one of those too? Or, that takes up a lot of space. I didn't realize that you have that many. So, okay. But then the other thing is that with many projects, and I know this isn't the same situation as most of the corridor projects, but there's often an interest in, setbacks and stepbacks. And we already have the issue of the size of the garage and the walls coming out all the way to the perimeter. I really just wish you could make it 3 stories higher and have a setback level at 2 or 3 and provide some vertical interest and more outdoor space for residents at levels other than, I thought maybe it was the roof, but maybe not, except for that one side, which is the sunny side.
So I have a question on height.
I'm not quite this.
Collier's next. Collier, yeah, go ahead. Are you, David, you're done, right? Are you done, David?
Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay.
Okay. First, in this, I'm sort of talking about building height, form, architecture, and also density as well. This is a comment to staff more, and not necessarily this planning staff, the comprehensive plan. We as a neighborhood have been at real disservice with the 1980 sector plan. We've been asking for years for an update to that Ballston sector plan. And I don't know if it's in the upcoming work plan, but it's projects like this that we have no guidance. In the project across the street for the Holiday Inn site, no good guidance. So we're just sort of, I don't want to say winging it, but we're just trying to do our best with the documents we have. And it's not good. Applicants is doing everything technically right, but we as a neighborhood, I don't know if this is what we would have come up with as a neighborhood. So get off my soapbox, but if you could pass that along to your other side of planning, I'd appreciate that.
And you'll hear this at PC.
Yes,
We've been raising this, as Mia knows,
Yes, we
for
will.
both of our entire terms on this commission, that given that the Ballston plan is older than the majority of planning commissioners, it's really outdated.
So,
Holly, did you have other comments?
yeah. I'm just going to follow on what Jim said. It's the architecture sort of blah. If you hadn't told me there was a gateway feature, I would have known that was a gateway feature. I don't know if that's something we need, but that's one of the few things our sector plan calls for. So we might as well try to do it. And so, yeah, the materials. Could you briefly talk about the materials on the, because it seems to be a lot of different materials. And I think that might be, at least one of my things, is just seems to be sort of chaotic in terms of the types and the number of materials.
And we do have like a small material board that we can share with you, just in order to kind of like get your mind like in terms of like how we're actually seeing like these as a color palette also for the overall design. And the main idea of the design is actually to treat these whole block as a collection of buildings, right? Buildings that they have like a relationship between them, but like ultimately they're like just they're like friends more than past, right? And we understand that the primarily idea of the project is to break down the scale and like the pedestrian scale. And you can see that, I mean, like we are looking at quality materials, like, and with really like very sophisticated like tones, right? And we have brick, we have like high density panels, we have like 2 or 3 different panels, like some like dark metal panels also for the storefront at the ground level. And again, it's a collection of buildings, and we're treating like each building in like a slightly different way, but the main idea is to break down the scale for like the pedestrian experience.
Thank you. I'll just say, I understand. It seems like you're trying to use the architecture or the materials to compensate for the sort of scale of the project, and that's good. Although I think I had in my comments in Ballston, at least in Ballston, Virginia Square, we always push strictly for masonry, brick, stone, cast stone, some metals, and the fake wood. We try to avoid.
That's at the very top, and like we're really careful about like using wood, because like maintenance is like a big issue with wood.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're showing in that panel, I mean, like it could be like a phenolic panel, or it could be also like a metal panel with some kind of wood print.
Okay, so what I've heard, what I've heard so far, a little bit of less than enthusiastic response at the moment so maybe if you can kind of go back and talk about it a little bit. let us know at the next meeting. Would that be a fair assessment of? Yeah. Michael, did you have something?
Yeah, I know a lot of people have asked about height and your question on what are the little things on top. If you went higher, say you went, I'm just gonna throw it up, you went, you're 7 stories now, you went 11 stories. Would that change the mechanical design so you couldn't have all those units on top?
You can go 180 feet with the condensers. You can go 180 feet with those. It's the most efficient system for this type of building.
Right, but those are individual units.
Yeah, you would do individual units, yeah.
Yes. So why that versus a different type of?
Well, we did a VRF system at a condominium building in Roslyn.
The Pierce?
Pierce, yeah, and actually had massive HVAC system issues with it. It was a Daikin system that came highly recommended. We toured 3 or 4, maybe 5 buildings when we did it. And the idea being is that you have one kind of central condensing unit. It's going to service 6 to 8 units. You put them on different sides of the building. So an east side and a west side. So as you have the sun rising, you have one unit start being heated, the other ones are being cooled, and they flip. And what we found is that the system was very unreliable. A lot of the pressure reducing valves kept failing. We've gone through 3 different sets of replacements. If the unit goes down for whatever reason, you're taking out 8 units and not 1. And so as a company, we would never do that again. And so a lot of our colleagues and peers that have tried to push into doing the VRF systems were very unsuccessful.
And why not put them into the individual units versus just putting them on top includes a green roof structure?
Arlington County design standards don't allow you to have them on the units like sticking out the facade. You don't want to do
No.
that.
They're like, there's another building, corner of older building, but corner of Washington and Glebe. It's built into the unit. It's flat.
So,
Shade.
yeah, so it's on the exterior wall. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
it's not sticking out. It's not a,
Right, but you have a vent on the exterior.
Yeah.
The PTAC or VTAC system, those are actually very inefficient systems. It's very difficult to meet the energy standards with those systems. They tend to be oversized as well because they typically have to get a bigger unit than may be necessary for the size of a given apartment. So it's an oversized system, which is not good for efficiency. The individual split systems are very efficient when they have the modulating speed on the fan, and so they actually contribute very well to the overall energy performance of the building.
Be dual use or all electric?
They
Dual fuel or all electric?
They are electric. Yes, I mean they use refrigerant, of course.
Yeah, but they're not dual fuel like.
No,
they're not
got
gas.
gas ones. So
No, they're electric.
all electric.
Yeah, because they're obviously high efficiency systems. They also reduce the utility bills for each of the residents as well.
I want to pause for a second and remind anybody who is online to make sure that if you want to do public comment, please put that in the chat so that we know to call on you when we get to that. So, David.
I have one other.
Yes.
Well, two actually. Even with a 7-story building, I think that a donut footprint is kind of tough to make something special out of the inside. I really wish there were a way that you could have the same square footage and have it be open on one side and let some air in, let some light in, at least part of the day. I just, that's another part that's overall footprint that I just think it's kind of a problem for the residents, really. I hope it can work out, but you're pretty much not going to get much light in there most of the time. And I wish there were a better solution and not have to sacrifice part of the building in order to get there. But to me, that seems a little problematic. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I've in a previous meeting on another project, I said the same thing, and we're talking about architecture and materials, and that includes glass. And I'm bringing up the glass because you really need to seriously think about bird-friendly glass. It's can be highly energy efficient and not much more, if at all, than other kinds of glass you might be looking at. But in this location, with the advantages that you have next to the wetland park and all of the vegetation that you put out there and the biophilic sense of things that you will create, it really needs to be, you know, a primary materials choice. Whatever, there are 100 different ways you can do it. Just make sure that the birds recognize that they can't fly through.
Yeah, and this will come up for sustainability at the next meeting, but you can be in advance because I'll be siding with him on that one myself. So.
But I do think, I mean, it is a sustainability issue, but it is a materials issue and an architecture issue because glass isn't the only solution. It's one of the main solutions, but it's all about how you make those right decisions in the first stage so that you get the best result at the end. If you decide after you've already got everything else settled, oh, we want to protect birds, well, then, you know, you're already so far down the line, it makes it harder and maybe more expensive to fix that problem. But your residents are going to have wonderful opportunities the more that wetland matures. But what we don't want is for all the people on the Fairfax side and on the trail side, you know, to end up with little carcasses on their patios and on their balconies. So, and it'll happen. Just the other night, it wasn't this, not even into the main migration yet, but 140,000 birds flew over Arlington in one night about 3 days ago. So it can be up to 5 million when the birds are migrating, you know, during the April and May primary period and the September and October period.
We'll be prepared to address that.
Okay.
Too, when we talk about the greater sustainability.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, so one thing with that, it's not just a thing with birds, but we have some naturalists who've done a lot of work to get bats back into the area. So it's also a nighttime issue. So lighting around rooftop lighting, you know, if you're gonna have a lot of glass, a lot of light coming out, which can impact, you know, wildlife isn't just during the day. There's a lot of nocturnal, especially the bats. We've done a lot of work to get the bats back in. So I wanted to bring that up. You mentioned the birds. So lighting at night is around the structure. But I wanted to ask you a question. You got the old parking garage. What's the structural integrity of that older, because it's been there since 1980?
So there's a structural engineer that's been on board since the very beginning of the project, and they've done an evaluation. The garage is in good shape. There will have to be some enhancements to the footings in order to build the 7-story building. But overall, the rest, you know, the garage itself is structurally sound.
Right, so we had a major issue about 15 years ago there. So as you know, there's a pond. The beavers built the dam, and the building owner had the beavers removed and the beaver dam removed because they were claiming it was causing water to leak into that parking garage. You know about that situation?
Have heard some things about it. The building, I mean, that has not come up in recent discussions. The building does have some systems and things like that, but I think that's something that
well, the issues about removing wildlife from a wild area to preserve a structure that you
That was
could,
probably many years ago.
it was 15 years ago.
It was
15
I
years.
remember that, yeah.
But again, that's why I ask about the structural, because if you've got water, are you gonna re-water, what are you gonna do to rehab it to last another? What's the projected life of the new building and making that older garage last with the life of that new building?
The intention, of course, is that the garage, the
Wait,
roof
so
of
let's
the
pause for a
garage-
minute. Concrete, if it's maintained, will last hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, we've seen skyscrapers and other concrete buildings are well maintained and they do that. Obviously we can't speak for the previous owner, but we care very much about the community and the wildlife. Certainly are not going to be relocating or doing anything to the wildlife. As a part of the project, we are going to go through and re-traffic code, reseal the garages. We're going to be installing brand new sub pumps and done that. We did a structural assessment of the garage. Structural engineer Eller Bryan, licensed structural engineer. Garage is perfectly structurally sound. The second thing is water infiltration. There's no known sources of water infiltration that are coming through that would be degrading the concrete or causing excessive wear and tear on the rebar. As a part of good use and ownership and maintenance of the building, we're going to be obviously maintaining, inspecting it. There's things that you can do for concrete if there's water infiltrating it. It's called a pressure injection, where you're going to go and install a sealant into it, which forces the water back out, and then it will come down to the sub-drainage system, and we'll make sure that the sub pumps are running. But we are going to be refurbishing the garage. We'll be installing new sub pump systems, and we have had a professional licensed engineer go through and determine that the garage is in good working order.
Hold on a second, Joan.
Yeah, first, I kind of concur with, and is, the extent that you can build out more room for tree plantings and a more gradual entrance. And it would be especially nice if, as a gateway, it's actually a green gateway. This is when people come off the highway that they're seeing that. I'm getting the sense that the footprint of the existing garage may be a limiting factor. That's most of the existing footprint of the lot.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit at SPRC too. We've actually put together a slide analyzing the existing tree canopy versus the proposed, doing better than the existing for a variety of reasons. We're actually going to be doing better than Ballston Holiday Inn as well. But yes, the overall footprint of that garage provides a constraint. One of the areas that we're actually looking at with staff for some additional tree plantings to go up above the 13.28% that we're at is sort of at that corner where you enter into the trail right along the RPA there. So to your point, that's actually kind of a prime target for us to put some additional tree plants.
With the wetlands there, it would be nice to get
Makes a lot of sense.
Remember, that will be a big topic the next.
Yeah, no, but it does. But the other question I had in terms is actually in terms of selection of materials that you're using, in terms of thinking of them from again, sustainability, but it's very, very well tied to the building. Materials for good insulation, or just even the siding of the building. So you're taking, passive use of the sun for heating and cooling, good insulating material that would be reflective that would help reduce the urban heat island impact. To what extent are you taking this into consideration, and how is it built into the design? And then more broadly is thinking of doing a zero carbon assessment, given the fact that you're reusing the existing garage and using wooden infrastructure that, from other conventional, that does substantially lower the carbon input compared to a conventional building that they would be comparing it to. But certainly looking at that in terms of really going the last mile for sustainability and thinking in terms of the materials that you're using and design structure in order to really kind of get down to that, close to a zero carbon.
So maybe if you could address that a little bit the next time when we talk about sustainability. I want to call on Elizabeth.
Yes, hi. I have heard many people talking about the importance of the landscaping and around the entranceways. And I heard you say earlier that the main entrances would be on the corner. So that means that there'll also be the push button for crossing the streets on both of those corners. So I just wanted to encourage that that if you do put in landscaping there, you're also going to have to put in an accessible path for a wheelchair to be able to reach the push buttons. And that's not ideal. So if possible, avoid putting tree plantings right around whatever post is going to have the push button to cross the street.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And that will, again, that will come up more so the next time, but that is something that they can come back with now for the next time. So thank you.
Great.
Michael?
I got a question. Being that we're talking about, are you going to have actually designed for accessibility apartments? So someone who's got a wheelchair with wider. Yeah. Well, how many?
The Virginia code requires 2% to meet the type A requirement. Every unit has to meet fair housing guidelines, which are adaptable. So the 2% on 328 is 7, if I'm doing the math correct in my head. That would meet the type A criteria.
And again, in our first meeting, before we even got to the online engagement, I did recommend that you reach out to the Advisory Disabilities Commission. Because sometimes the standards are not necessarily as great as you could do. So, yes, so if we can talk about that the next time, but since it was brought up, I was like, hey, wait a minute, there's something else. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on now to, let's see, so are we, I guess, just site design, right? Site design and layout, and then the resource protection area. Comments, questions? I mean, we kind of overlapped some of this a little bit already.
Well, if you don't have anybody else, I'll just overlap a little bit.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the DES has now replaced the Beavers as the chief engineers for the wetland park. So keeping that pond operating properly as a stormwater facility, I think will take care of any future issues with water. That's the whole.
That was the point of the whole project.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah.
So on just going back to the facades again, just international dark sky standards will take care of most of the issues of lighting that's really harmful to people as well as wildlife. So, and it's cheaper. So
yeah, we implemented on our last project as well.
Yeah, great. That's great. I couldn't really quite interpret the west side, the west side of the building in terms of where the entrance to the garage goes relative to the units that are right there on the lower levels.
We're gonna render this for the next one to get more in depth, just for many reasons. But this is kind of what we have.
Actually, zoom in on this slide a little bit because it does actually.
Those are double-story units that they have like an outdoor patio. And we have like a planter in front of the patio that kind of like just it's kind of like covering like the garage wall in a way.
So it's part of the bioretention system.
Yeah.
So the building is set back from the garage ramp that you can see there. So that does give the opportunity for the patios. The bioretention serves as a buffer between the patios and the ramp.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the reasons for keeping the entrance, but it's kind of an eyesore. I mean, it's kind of a gouge into the space there. I was wondering whether there's any way to cover up part of it with a bigger patio area of some kind. which might also keep the weather out of the garage a little bit, but I don't know how that would work.
We could study, we talked about that early just to figure out how to create more usable roof area. The issue is the ramp comes up at such an angle that you kind of lose the head height you need to get the vehicle, especially the ADA accessible required vehicles at the 84.
Yeah, no, I've been by there many, many times by that little gate, going to the park before. So I know how, it doesn't, I mean, it can't be very steep, but it doesn't drop very fast. Half of the distance is still within the height of a vehicle, right? Basically. So, okay, yeah.
So maybe if you could, when we come back the next time, since we are talking transportation, see, because looking at it right now, if I had a patio there and I don't know how much, is there a foot, 2 feet, and all of a sudden, it's.
We can tell you, we'll come back.
Yes, exactly, yes.
And then there is also the issue, which maybe you've already thought of, but all the cars going in and out of there with how many 300 parking spaces, and the exhaust from cars. There still will be some cars that have exhaust, at least for a while. So it's going to come, a lot of it's going to come right out of there unless there's some way to deal with that. So.
Okay, so I think it's safe now to move on to streetscapes. And again, there's been a lot of overlap.
Quick comment.
Yeah, okay.
Jim, I think I had said Fairfax Drive is owned by VDOT. That is what the county has in terms of like real estate documentation in front of the building. We see that VDOT boundary is actually kind of by Wakefield Street. So majority of the streetscape on Fairfax Drive, from the documents we have, are owned by VDOT, but we know we've been working with the applicant and asking them to show us like the boundary that they have, and we're happy to share our information as well. Perhaps that's something we can discuss as SPRC number 2 as well.
Especially transportation, yes. Thank you. Streetscape.
I appreciate the work that's gone on the Fairfax Drive. The constraints are disappointing. The 18 feet we have to deal with. I agree that we need to make sure we have plenty of space there, because we are looking right now. We're currently updating our master transportation plan. Once that's finished, they're going to start looking at corridors, and one of the corridors they're going to be looking at is Fairfax Drive. We as a neighborhood and other advocates are thinking this is going to be a major bike multimodal street, and so that path needs to be as wide as practicable to permit all of the folks that are going to be going up and down. So flipping the landscaping from one side to the other, I think is beneficial. Although of course having the trail right up against the knee wall makes it not fully usable, right? You have a shy space. People don't walk right next to or bike right next to walls, so it makes the effective width a little narrower. The trees along it, please make sure those are nice shade trees all the way down, and frankly, hopefully you can work with the county all the way up to the sound wall, just beyond the edge of your property, so that we can get a nice shade. We unfortunately, while the wetlands project was a great project, one of the things we lost was some great shade along that trail because they're the wrong type of tree. And the new trees don't look like they're going to provide any shade anytime soon. So as much shade as we can get, so we can get people walking, biking, so it's pleasant out there. On the opposite side, on the private drive, I agree with staff with that. We should make that connection along. You're putting that sidewalk in right now at the current configuration. The sidewalk just sort of ends. This one, they actually ends a little further, but we should go and connect to the trail on that north side. And then finally, at the intersection of that private street and Wakefield, that crossing, even though these are relatively low There's not a lot of traffic on these streets. People go fly through there right now. They don't even stop at the stop signs. And that crossing is really long, ridiculously long. So we should really look at putting in, this sort of gets into transportation. I know we'll talk about, but there's also streetscape, moving the curb so that we can have a curb extension there at the corner to shorten this distance. And also, so people also right now, people are parking literally at the corner, and they're blocking the ramp, the curb ramp, because it's sort of strange how everything's laid out. And I think it's just because it's currently a private street. And I guess we'll talk about next time what the county's role will be moving forward, sort of the jurisdiction of that street. So that was that.
And I've got Joan, and then I've got two online, then we'll come back to Jim. Joan.
Yeah, just wondering about the potential of actually narrowing Fairfax Drive to build in. I mean, you know, if we're going to put trees, then you got to put in enough room for them to grow. So you've got to accommodate the needed soil volume for long-term survivability. Whether that there may be other strategies of being able to use sidewalk structures that allow for volume underneath the sidewalks and that. But I mean, it doesn't make any sense not to have the volume of soil that you need. But again, if you can extend out into Fairfax Drive, I mean, obviously, I know that's beyond what the company can do, but between the county and VDOT and that is maybe thinking, and that hopefully fits in with the broader master transportation update of actually being more accommodating to multimodal modes of transportation. So, you know, that probably would solve some of the concerns people have on the streetscapes, is actually if you don't have as wide a Fairfax Drive as at that point. And I'm not sure you necessarily need it. Thank you. Elizabeth online? Oh, I'm sorry, Eric.
Hi. So yeah, I think what you're talking about and where the entrance to the building is, there's just so much going on, and it's not very detailed as to how all that sort of comes together. You have a pedestrian walkway that has to jog over a little bit. There's also, I guess, the light pole, which is right in that corner as well. And then you have the bicyclists coming off of the cycle track. You got turning cars. You got a variety of things. Currently, the entrance is like around the corner, so that's not an issue. When it sort of brought right up into that corner, I think it needs to be detailed better to really make certain that we don't have conflicts there. Thanks.
Yes, and the applicant will take that into consideration for our next meeting when we talk about transportation. Meg, I think you're online.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. This also floats in between transportation and streetscape, but that roadage, I would love to see it shrunk a little bit. Really do urge for that narrower road while we have the opportunity to. That area is incredibly high traffic, and it transitions to a dense and super pedestrian area. I think this is our chance to safely move it narrower so that traffic naturally slows down.
Awesome. Thank you for your comment. Jim.
I'd like to add my voice to Collier, Joan, and Meg, because it's exactly where I was going with asking about who owns that property. And this is partly site design, partly transportation, but the big trees there, having big trees lining a street is a natural traffic calmer. So yes, the more we can get there, the better. Have them close to the street, so that's really good. The street is way too wide because it's essentially an on and off ramp to 66. I bike there all the time, and it is scary to bike. It's scary to cross the street as a pedestrian because they're coming off at 55 miles an hour because it was engineered to be a fast exit, both directions. And even if you don't lose lanes, narrowing the lanes would help, and turn that extra space as those have said. That's where you could get more trees. That's where you could get natural speed limiting just by design. And that's really important between where the ramps end and Glebe Road. And again, this isn't really the applicant. This is DES and CPHD, that it's really time to get this design right so that it does in fact transition, as Joan said, from an interstate to a pedestrian oriented urban environment.
That's a gateway.
Right. And that's exactly right, because that's the gateway. That's the gateway.
Excuse me. So, oh, Michael.
Yeah, this has to do with clarification for staff. Is there a way to get VDOT engaged in these discussions? Because as you said, that street is owned by VDOT all the way to Kensington. And I know in past tries with things, it's been difficult to deal with VDOT to make changes. So as you've talked about, we've got to get VDOT in order to make those changes. VDOT has to be at the table. You can't do it without VDOT. So it's just, again, it gets back to the streetscape. You can't change or modify the current streetscape without having VDOT in the room with us.
Dated sector plan.
The applicant is coordinating with VDOT. I welcome them to speak a little bit more on how that process is going.
Oh, and just to say that we provided them the set of plans that you all have seen, and they've given us a preliminary round of comments, of course, none of which addressed the things that you brought up this evening.
Yeah.
They weighed in on, at least generically, on utility utility connections and the possibility of the location of the street trees. That's something that is a wild card. So just to set expectations, their preferences and guidance on where street trees can go differs in some cases from what the county would expect. So it's an ongoing discussion, and we will certainly.
So there will be more discussion from this meeting before the next one where we go to transportation.
And my point is, can the county also go to VDOT, not just the applicant? Because we've got community views coming in that will help the applicant with a streetscape design. And if VDOT and so again, we need all parties to get VDOT to the table versus throw it over the transom, see what they say, and it gets thrown back.
No, we definitely heard you about, I think we heard a number of people echoing that comment about narrowing Fairfax. So we'll take that back and talk about it. I'm not aware of any plans or designs or studies that we've done on this stretch of Fairfax, but certainly we'll have this conversation.
The resource protection plan is part of this topic now, right?
Well, we passed it, but you can, if you have something else.
Because that I'm fine with, letting the building stay as it is. It's there. Preserving that garage is a real win. And once you preserve the garage, it's really irrelevant what happens on top of it as far as the RPA, because it's the garage that's impinging on the RPA. So it seems silly to even have to jump through extra hoops, because as long as that garage is there, it's there. And what you do with it isn't going to change the RPA or the effect on the RPA.
Just 2 seconds on the
2 seconds. Yep,
So
thank you.
not to throw VDOT under the bus, but they're not here, so I will. VDOT has been incredibly difficult to deal with. I think that's
It's not new.
Not a new one, but particularly lately, for those of us who do work across the Commonwealth, that's an ongoing problem. I think, in terms of getting VDOT involved, I think that's probably a very long-term conversation. One that, certainly sure we're happy to help engage with. That it may or may not align with this project, I think remains to be seen. I would point out too, the other elephant in the room is MATA, right? And changing and narrowing the lanes and the sidewalk out there is going to have potential impacts on where the MATA tunnel is running, and MATA has a big say in that. So it isn't just as simple as saying, hey, VDOT, let us, scooch the street down a little bit.
Do you have showing where WMATA's tunnels are under
It's on the side, it's on the curb.
Yeah, it's right there.
on your curb?
And we'll talk more about that the next time.
Okay, but
We'll have an exhibit.
have that, yeah. Get that in.
Wrap this up a little bit. Also, Eric, you have We'll take this as the last comment on this before we go to.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, isn't there a lighting and signs control box, a very large one, which is right on the edge of the property as well? And is that an issue?
We're talking about the silver box at the, near the corner. That's a traffic control cabinet. Yes, that would need.
I thought it's like a big black or brown box. It's really large. It's right kind of as you get beyond the path that goes on the west side of the building. There's a pretty large box there. And I think it's right on the edge of the path.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the traffic control box. I think what Jeff was saying, if you didn't hear him, is that needs to get rearranged and removed, Jeff.
The one at the east corner does. It sounded like we were talking about a piece of infrastructure on the western end.
Okay.
And that,
You can report back at
we'll
the
have
next
to
one.
dig a little bit into
Okay.
that one, yes.
Eric, thank you. All right, one quick last one, David, then we're gonna go to public comment.
Just on the side street, the Wakefield streetscape issue with the trees and the garage. And I imagine it may be difficult, not desirable to alter the garage wall at all, anything like that. But if you can't make the pits wider in between the curb and where that is, at least you can make them longer by making them continuous with cells underneath, even if you have to put a pervious hard surface over it so that people can walk in between some of those areas. But that would expand the volume quite a lot, soil volume, and allow that to stay hydrated and allow the trees to talk to each other too. So that might allow you a little bit larger species in a lot of cases, which, I think maybe not the biggest tree, canopy trees, but much better than you would do with the small pits where you're probably looking at understory trees with the only thing that's viable. So I think there's a better, there's a middle road there. If you could just go the whole length.
We'll have some more information on that in SPRC too, when we start talking about the canopy and so forth.
All right, so it's time for public comment. I see we have one commenter. Dr. Byrne, you've got 2 minutes. Go ahead. Dr. Byrne? Dr. Byrne, can you hear us?
I think we need to make that.
Oh, hold on just a second. We're working some technical stuff here. Bear with us.
Should be able to unmute now.
Dr. Byrne, can you unmute yourself and speak? Hold on.
He has the ability.
He has. Okay.
Maybe the NCAA game is keeping him.
Dr. Byrne, can you unmute and speak? While we're waiting for that, I want to thank everybody tonight for coming out. Great ideas. We've all taken lots of notes. We will hear back from the applicant on the next meeting, which is tentatively the 28th.
Tentatively the 28th.
28th of April. So, and thank you all very much. This was a great constructive civil meeting and appreciate that. Dr. Byrne, one last chance. Always like to have public comment. I don't want anyone to feel left out. So.
And we are rescheduling.
We are
Yes.
rescheduling the walk. We might not have a huge amount of notice for that, but we will be doing that. So,
We're certainly happy to get his comments written.
yeah. So, yeah, Dr. Byrne, if you aren't able to speak, if you can still hear us, if you can just send comments to Matt, myself, however, we'll make sure that, we all get a chance to see them. So I guess on that note, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the great comments.
Oh, yes, and we want to keep the signs for the next time, please. Thank you.